Welcome to Body by Design. I'm your host, Blue Driver, a women's strength training and metabolism coach. I went from years suffering hormone imbalances, looking soft and bloated, to symptom-free and building muscle for a toned athletic physique. Since then, I've made it my mission to empower women to take control of their own health, hormones and body composition. So grab a cup of coffee and let's build your body by design. Welcome back to Body by Design, everyone. And this week is a bit of I feel like it's going to be a bit of an epic podcast. I don't know how long this is going to go for. Deane and I have just decided to wing it. I've spoken a lot on my Instagram and stories about Deane's past health condition. He's recently had some more surgery, which we'll have a chat about. But also my recent health, which has been stage 3 adrenal insufficiency, which came from the last few years, probably the last 5 years, really, but the last couple of years has been particularly hard. And I've had a lot of people ask me on Instagram about how Deane's doing, and, just the ins and outs of what's happened over the last few years. So we thought we would get on and do a podcast together. So welcome to my podcast, baby.
Hi, baby. I find it interesting that people on your have an interest in what's happening with me. So obviously I do get spoken about.
Oh, yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deane. You can put a face to it now.
Yeah, you get spoken about a lot. So that's okay. I think, I'm very much an open book. I think I've always been like this. And, whether we realize it or not, what happens in our life is directly connected to our health journey, from our physique right through to our general health. And I mean, you've experienced general health even backwards and forwards with your physique, and it, is directly related to what is going on in our lives. So I think some of the things, look, we honestly, everyone, we spoke about this beforehand. We were like, which angle are we going to tackle this from? And for me personally, there's a lot of angles. Yes, I want to raise some awareness around what cortisol and not addressing the stress and emotion and overload in your life can do, though there probably wasn't a lot I could do about the stuff going on in my life. I've just gotten to the point now where it's all settled down, but I carry the trauma from it and need to continue to address that. I want to advocate for people who end up in the medical system or implore you to take care of your health now so you aren't at the mercy of the healthcare system. And I hear it in the UK and the US and everything as well. Australia is not the only place. And just how life in general can really impact you. And then obviously to answer a lot of questions about what's happened, as I do talk a lot about you on Instagram. All good, baby. It's all good. So Deane has had kidney cancer and along the way lost his organ. So he's an organ down now. But it's been a really long journey to get there. So let's kick it off with the day you went mountain biking. Tell us about it, Deane.
The day I went mountain biking. Yeah, look, that probably goes back to, the way I've been my whole life pre-cancer. Very athletic, very driven to, not through arrogance or anything like that, but through my own well-being. Was a very fit guy. Mountain biking, one of those sports that probably I should caveat here that all the sports I like to do have some level of risk with them. I don't do golf and I don't do 10-pin bowling or anything while I do now. But everything was an impact sport. Everything had an element of risk, and that's what I liked about the sports I did. So mountain biking being no exception. And as it turned out, I had a reasonable crash, and it led to a bit more than what we'd anticipated. So, it was just any other day, mountain biking with the kids, really. For whatever reason, I'd got behind one of the kids, hit a jump a little bit slower than I normally would. Still got the same amount of air, but of course the bike to over-rotate, and I ended up hitting the ground and putting the steering head of the bike straight into my chest, which did a bit of damage, a bit of hematoma on the liver, and that's originally what they were looking at in the hospital. This is the crash I had where I came home. This is the second one I had. This is one I didn't drive home, so this one was good. from
Hmm.
that perspective. I didn't drive home with a head injury. But yeah, this one I got brought home to Lou, and I know about this now. At the time, I didn't understand any of this. I had my priorities, which were not her priorities, I guess, or anyone else's priorities. For me, when I hit the ground, I'd put my hands out in front of me, jarred both my wrists. I had sort of a bit of blackening up through the palms and through the wrist already, obviously bark taken off them. A lot of bark missing off the arm, and I've still got scarring on my elbows from it. Bits of gravel and stuff all hanging out of me. So my concern was I thought I'd broken my wrists. I wasn't
My
aware that I
concern
couldn't
was
breathe.
Deane could barely speak because he couldn't breathe. He's there going, my wrist. I'm like, but can you breathe? Yeah, I'm fine, but my wrist. So in the end, I say to Deane, how about we take you to the emergency department to have your wrists looked at? Yeah, okay, he says. Tell you what,
Yeah, so
we're
we got almost
driving
to the
there.
hospital before we were sitting in the car, and for whatever reason, I might have calmed down a bit or switched my focus and realised that I was actually struggling to breathe. So um, yeah, well done, baby. You picked that up better than I did.
Probably that.
And then in the hospital too, everyone was fussing over everything other than my concern, which was still my hands and my wrists. And every time I tried to present a wrist to a medic, they would shove it back down quite roughly to my side and more concerned about my chest area. So,
Well, it wasn't really chest even, it was internal. So he's copped the handlebars across his abdomen and higher abdomen. So they were looking for internal injuries, which led to, we'll get to the point of how this relates to the cancer, which led to internal scans done to check that he hadn't done any damage. And they questioned his kidney. But back in the day when he was young, he'd had an accident and he thought they were talking about that kidney. Anyway, we digress a little bit, I suppose, but it ended up with, we'll refer you to a urologist to check that out. We got a letter in the mail saying you're a Cat 2. Me working at that hospital, I understand what a Cat 2 is, which isn't that urgent. Okay, no worries. Fast forward 2 months, we have an appointment, end up in the doctor's office.
yeah, and incidental finding from the scans they did at the time of my mountain bike accident showed up uh, two tumours on the bottom of my left kidney. So, like you say, we turned up at the hospital for just, I don't know, we didn't really know what to expect. It was I'd
I
just
think we
been
were thinking
referred
just like
on.
scar tissue from your accident, but we were actually talking about opposite kidneys and hadn't really connected that, had we?
Yeah, and probably one thing to point out to your listeners too is my medical history better than I do. I probably go through a lot of blokes. And what Lou's referring to there is I had an accident in my early 20s on a motorcycle, had a car come out in front of me at a stop sign, and I just plowed through the side of it. I ruptured a kidney, but it also had a birth defect where I had blockages down between my kidney down to my bladder. So left, right,
So at this
yeah,
point, we've got one right kidney that's been damaged and ruptured. It healed, but it is compromised. And he has had a previous operation on the kidney that's now gone for the blockage.
yeah.
So he has
I,
quite a significant kidney history.
so yeah, going into the doctors and then basically what we were told it was cancer.
Mm.
Didn't really look, the bedside manner of the urologist that we had at the time was, I suppose, lacking, is probably being kind to him. Literally went through everything, telling us this is fine, this is that, and oh, by the way, you've got cancer. It was almost like a throwaway line at the end of it. For me, that just
It
left
was very
me,
matter of a fact. And there's the cancer. Like we knew
yeah,
going on when we really had no idea. It was a utter shock to us.
yeah. So for me, I said nothing. I just sat there stunned. I had, that's the last thing you you ever want to hear. Um,
Mm.
and you're never prepared for it. It's, probably to back it up a little bit here, I've got a family history with cancer.
Mm.
There's a fair chance I was going to have a cancer of some description. Genetically, the odds were there. You certainly shouldn't have come as a surprise, but you can be as prepared as you think you are to the day you get told you have it, and your whole world just stops. And
Fully
it's not, and
expecting
not
to
just
do
for
all of that.
me, that affected that you as well. I mean, you know, you just broke down at that point, really.
Mm.
Started crying. You didn't know how to process that either. And it's not a lot of information in the words you have cancer either. That doesn't tell you anything, is it? Am
Well,
I dying
he
today,
certainly
tomorrow, 10 years?
he certainly didn't give as much information. This
No, all he did was give you a box of tissues launched across the room at you, and that's not exaggerating it. He literally just tossed a box of tissues at you and told you I wasn't going to die immediately. So that was, talk about a bit of stress. And that was our morning. I think it was the morning finding out that, and from there the journey just began and just kept taking. Um, you know, there's no simple medical way for me. It's what's the most obscure way, and what's the
Mm.
chances that nobody would have this bloke's got it? And our journey just went from there.
So you also had the blockage as well. So the blockage they supposedly fixed many moons ago, they hadn't. So they found the tumors, but they also found that the kidney, the tube that literally takes the urine from the kidney to the bladder there was a vein resting across the top of it rather than tucking underneath, and it crimps the tube. So what happens is the kidney backs up because it needs pressure to push through the tube to get it to drain to the bladder. So his kidney was quite enlarged from all the distension that it's had over time, pulling back. So that had to be corrected as well. This doctor turned out to be not the greatest of doctors. Now, of course, having working there at the time, the first thing I've done is gone straight to the head of surgical at the time, where urology fell under, and I've gone, right, we've got private health insurance, we can go to Brisbane, because we're in a regional town. And I'm like, do we go to Brisbane? And I was told by her that his bedside manner's terrible, but he's fine as a doctor. So that was one person that told me he was fine. And another one that ran the theatre units, nursing manager that ran the theatre units, said that, yes, he was fine. He just liked to do more advanced procedures that probably should be done in Brisbane, but she would keep an eye out. So part of where, my personal, cancer touches everyone, but part of where it starts for me is I've trusted these people that I worked with and took their word for it. And I've said to Deane, you're Cat 1, it's cancer. Cat 1 means you're seen within 30 days. So even though it was a public hospital, there wasn't going to be a big wait list. You're going to be seen. What's the point of spending all that money because private health doesn't cost bugger all. Like it costs a lot to actually go and do it. So I said, what's the point of spending all that money when we know you're going to, and he's a good doctor. And, Deane trusted that too. And unfortunately, we were both let down. So this doctor was already under investigation when the hospital employed him, and they knew that. So AHPRA is the medical board over here that regulates everything. And you have to do an AHPRA screening before you employ someone. So the very person that was on the panel that employed this man knew his history and told me he was fine, yet he was under investigation for failing to read scans and tell someone that they were dying. And the person died, unfortunately. And it wasn't until he died that they realised that he had this terrible cancer. So he was already under investigation for that. In the meantime, he operated on Deane. Unblocked his kidney first and put a stent in, and that maybe should have been our first indication, hey babe, because that didn't go right. And he ended up back in hospital after I'd called him and spoke to him, and he told me, I'll just find some other medication. If you've got something like Panadine Forte there, just take that. So he'd advised me for Deane to take my daughter's Panadine Forte that she'd had left over from a surgery, and not to bother coming to emergency because there's nothing he could do. It would pass as long as at this point, he was in a lot of pain. So it turns out he's nicked the tube when he's gone in looking to see what was wrong. But Deane did.
That was when I sent you a photograph of a bottle of Coke and a Coke bottle full of my urine, and you just couldn't tell the difference between the two of them. But that was okay. As long as it wasn't fresh red blood, then we didn't have a problem. That was the advice I was given. So
and then by the next day, one of the kids come and got me. It was Australia Day, and we had people over having a barbecue, and one of the kids come and got me and said, Dad needs you. We got a really big walk-in robe, and he was literally on his hands and knees rocking, almost like a woman in labour, in so much pain. So he ended up in hospital for 3 days after that. But the stent was forgotten. There was a stent put in to help open the tube, and it was forgotten. And it was only because I was able to directly get hold of the nurse, having worked there. And she insisted, didn't she, Deane, that there was no stent?
Yeah, and it was, I mean, look, fortunate that somewhere in and out of anaesthetic, I'd heard the word stent and was adamant that I had a stent still in place. I think if I hadn't latched onto that word,
Mm.
then that thing would have stayed in place. I don't know
I
what
didn't
that looks
realise.
like
No
if
one
they
had said
don't take it
anything to
out.
me.
But so that's another surgical procedure I would have had to have
Mm.
once my body decided to absorb that thing.
She went digging in the records when you called her and she was like, oh my God, there is. She found it deep, dark in the operative records because we later find out that this doctor hasn't documented anything about the stent. It was only the serial number in the records that she actually found, and the stent was removed. But it was it was meant to be removed at 2 weeks. It was removed in just under 4 weeks, which apparently is clinically appropriate. But they didn't address the fact that he told him not to go to hospital. They didn't address the fact that the only reason why the stent was known to be there was because I worked there and I was able to go to the nurse that ran the clinics and go, hey, something's going on here. You need to talk to Deane. Fast forward, you end up in hospital. You had a partial nephrectomy. He's opened Deane up from side to side, so almost belly button and right round to his side. So probably a good incision like that. There you go, measurements. He's lost part of his kidney.
That's only one of this. That's only one. I've got what looks like I've had a cesarean as well underneath
Yeah, that was later on though.
No, that was with that surgery. And then I had another one on the second one. I've got 2 cut lines.
I won't get into it here. He had one cut for this surgery. That was it. One cut for this surgery round there. That obviously happened. You talk to him afterwards when you go back for a review, and it's like, yep, got it all, clear margins, you're good to go. Time passes and he's not getting his reviews done properly. Oh, first of all, it was they denied that his high blood pressure that everyone kept getting very concerned about. It was literally stroke material, that it had nothing to do with his kidney. Meanwhile, we had given him all the medical records from your other damaged kidney, and he was not looking at you holistically from the point of view that you had a damaged kidney and now we lost part of a kidney, plus that kidney was also enlarged from all the blockage. And he just kept saying, no, it's lifestyle. We're talking about a man that had a 6-pack. It was, would ride 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers, ate really well. It was not lifestyle. So that was ignored. And then he all of a sudden was suspended from the hospital. And we were concerned about Deane not getting his review because in their eyes, doctor got clear margins, didn't need to worry about it. And there were more urgent patients to see. And without a urologist there, they were just bringing in locums where they could. So Deane wasn't getting reviewed. So we eventually went private, where we found our now amazing, amazing doctor. He's been awesome, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's good. And I'm glad I've had him for, well, unfortunately, 2 more surgeries.
But we went and saw him just for the review. What was the outcome?
Probably just want to back this up a little bit and just cover off on some of the stresses that come with the cancer. And the first time we had the diagnosis too, because there's a couple of other things that were at play for us at that time. As if cancer itself isn't enough of a stressor, we had ongoing issues with my ex-wife and a custody dispute that
was in
at the time
2 years.
Yeah, look, dragged around through the courts, a lot of money put into court orders that we later found out
her trying
with
to
the
take
paper they printed on.
Yeah.
And
when we talk about this,
her trying to take the kids and run with them basically, but that didn't happen. We ended up keeping the kids with us for a couple of years, and she still managed to end up getting the kids in the end. But at that time, we were dealing with that, and it also put additional pressures on us, in that we didn't want to. I certainly didn't want to share anything with the kids around the cancer itself. A couple of reasons. Obviously, you don't want to stress your kids out. As kids, they will hear the word cancer and immediately think you're going to die.
We would have told them, though. We wouldn't have kept it.
Yeah. But you're right. The bigger reason we kept it from everyone was the fact that we just didn't want it used as ammunition against us. However, she could do that through the court system, or just take advantage of it to try and, mentally bury you, basically. So we had to deal with that too.
Yeah. And we did it in silence. So basically, very, very few people knew that Deane had cancer and knew that he'd had a partial nephrectomy. The way we got around the operation was we told them he had a blockage, which was the truth, and that needed to be fixed. But the whole cancer journey was done in silence. And I think even you and I, we kind of just went around, it was weird. It was very numb. It was just like doing day-to-day life. It was because we were just trying not to talk about it and pretend that everything was okay. So we did. And I suppose you pretend long enough, you believe it long enough, but it's buried in you.
Yeah. And I think the other part to talk about too was, as we go through each of these stages here, is the recovery post surgery or even the preparation before, because you've seen it as this has progressed. My way of dealing with it has changed as I've gone further through my journey here. During the first diagnosis, it very much was a case mentally for me of, okay, so what do we do to fix it? When can we fix it? And what do I need to do to get past it? And it became a thing where I never processed any of this mentally. It was just, it was almost like a military mindset came into it for me. And it was right. So I need to do this to get back to where I was beforehand and get on with my life. And so prior to cancer, a very fit guy. After my first surgery, I got my fitness back after that. Now, there were subtle changes to what I could and couldn't do sport-wise, endurance-wise, certainly going out and flogging myself here in the tropics, sweating and, putting stress on your kidneys is not a good idea. And we did have to make some changes to what I did for sport. I shifted to indoor cycling and stuff like that.
That came after navratnam.
That was it.
Yeah. So we ended up seeing this second doctor, thinking it was just a review. And we're sitting there and he just says, you haven't been managed right. The type of cancer you got does not appear in 40-year-olds. It's normally, 70, 80-year-olds. It doesn't present as two tumors normally. It only presents as one. It's slow growing, and Deane's went from a 1 to a grade 2 in a matter of months, moved very quickly, keeping in mind all the stress that we were under with the children and the ex-wife and all this. And this cancer just did not behave the way it should. And then he said, you've also got the other kidney that is not operating well, so you probably should have a nephrologist as well because of your blood pressure and everything, which was something we had tried to highlight and was ignored. To then have him say, and your positive margins. So we discovered that day that the doctor never got all of the tumor, and he told us he had. And further down the track, we actually have evidence that he really just didn't read them. He just checked them off because he was arrogant enough to just go visually. He thought he got it all, and that's it. That's all he needed to do.
I'll just speak for me on that. You can cover off your thoughts on it. For me, the day we got told I had positive margins and was like being told you had cancer all over again, because we thought we were in the clear. We thought we'd done everything we needed to do. I'd got my fitness and everything back. I was basically functioning pretty much back at the level I was before I had the surgery. And that took a lot to come back to, just with the type of surgery I had. Obviously, I was in my early 50s, but your age is a factor. You don't bounce back like you do when you're 20. We got to the point where, and for me, psychologically, I'd put it behind me. I was moving forward with life, and I had a cancer scare. Surgery had fixed it, and on we went. And then to just be sort of blindsided with, you still got the possibility of that, it had escaped beyond where they'd taken, that section of the organ.
And then this was where the whole
it just levels you again. It just puts you back in that headspace again. And as much as you try and put it to the side of, like it's a remote chance, and it was a low chance that it could reoccur. There is that possibility, and that's where your mind goes to. As well, we later discovered, going forward a couple of years, we ended up back there again. So Yeah.
That's, I mean, you had a whole lifestyle change from this because your other kidney was damaged and it now became, and the way he did the surgery, there was a lot of damage done inside. So it wasn't just he got in there and cleanly took away part of the kidney and happened to leave some margins behind. He did some damage to the vein that runs down from the kidney down to the testicles, which caused hydrocele in you. For those who don't know what a hydrocele is, guys, block your ears, you might not want to hear about it, but basically his left testicle, the sac around his testicle fills with fluid, and he had, when it would flare, it would flare right up and fill with fluid, but it doesn't go back down again. So he would get these flares, and it just kept getting larger and larger. But that was where you were actually told no more mountain biking, no more riding on the road, because you've got one kidney left. The other one is because of this damage that he'd done. He said we can't go in, and it was blocked again. What he did to unblock it, he reblocked it by these clips, which apparently they don't even use anymore. It's very old technology. These clips where he clipped everything off from taking part of the kidney. He's jammed one in up underneath the ureter where it drains. So he's unblocked that tube in that first surgery, but blocked it again when he's taken the part of the kidney. And the kidney's now that damaged that it's a matter of not if, but when they take the kidney. So there was that. And it was like, and the other kidney's a bit damaged. You need to, high risk sports gone. So there was no more rugby, no more mountain biking,
Yes.
no more cycling. So, so much was taken from you. And from my perspective, I fell in love with this man that was active and healthy and fit and took pride in the fact that as a 40-year-old, he was running rings around the 20-year-olds on the rugby field. And, it was such a lively part of him. And all those sports, like you spoke about in the beginning, being those adrenaline sports, were taken from you because of the damage this man had done. Cancer aside, just the operation itself, he'd done such a butchering job. And on the scans, and we've never really found out, no one's ever said anything, there was this clump, bright white clump, and it appears there's just this clump of clips. And all what the current doctor has said is he did use quite a number of clips, which is highly unusual, but it's the way he says it and that bright patch that we saw. So, now Deane's like going, okay, well, I can't do any of that anymore. So we set up an indoor cycling Zwift, and you cycle online with all these other people. It was amazing, but that was aggravating his hydrocele. So sitting in the saddle and doing 100 Ks with his balls bouncing up and down, we worked out was flaring them. So then that was taken from him too. And I watched this amazing, lively man that was not going to let anything get him down fall. It changed you. Now, we spoke about this before we got on, and we said, can we do this without crying? And I don't know that I'm doing a very good job at the moment, but it changed you.
Yeah, it has. And even to today, like, as you know, I struggle to find a
Seeing
physical
you like the
sport
gym,
or
by
an
the way.
activity that I want to stick with and do. I do the gym out of sufferance. It's not my sport. It
Not
never
what you
has
love.
been. It never will be. I do it because I have to maintain some semblance of fitness for my own well-being going forward. But all the sports that I loved and enjoyed, look, I just can't do, particularly now after having a full nephrectomy. So the left-hand kidney is gone. The right one has a line of scar tissue up the back of it where I ruptured it in a motorcycle crash in my 20s. I've got one kidney that's not 100%.
Yeah.
And I've got to do everything I can
And if he
to
ends it,
preserve it now.
yeah, because,
Otherwise, it's dialysis, and geez, that's your whole world compromised there.
so the reason for taking these sports away is any sort of crash that might risk internal injury, could risk injuring that kidney, being out in the road. A car could hit him, which is what happened originally. He was on a motorbike and a car hit him and it ruptured his kidney. It's just all those things, and it's about preserving the kidney. Anyway, so that day we found out
Yep.
that we didn't have clear margins. So that was like that shocking diagnosis all over again. And it was a matter of, because the kidney was still blocked and it was causing pain. So another
Yeah, I
thing
guess
is living in
to
the tropics.
put a picture on it, if you looked at my two kidneys side by side on an X-ray, the left-hand one was almost twice the size of the right one, and that was it literally being just blown apart under pressure internally with that blockage, holding fluid above it and just, tearing the organ internally. So
So you were
I guess
managing
for
it.
me,
So
yeah, look, there's an upside for it. For me, over time, I've developed a very high pain threshold because I've just lived with, that pain for years as it slowly built, and just took it as that was just part of getting old, and didn't really think much more of it until you get the evidence of an X-ray put in front of you. You can see just how bad that kidney has got.
you were in management, so living in the tropics, apart from those, things that you love doing as sport and fitness were taken from you. You now also had the, how much you consume, because when you exercise, you sweat heaps and you drink a lot, and volume of fluid, because the kidney couldn't drain fast enough with the blockage. Volume of fluid was an issue. So, indoor air conditioned, this is why, he's doing the weight training, because that's what he needed to do. But like you say, it's not what you love. But fast forward, the doctor has said, but don't worry, because you're at about 2 years at that point, 2 years post the nephrectomy. And the new doctor had said to you that if it doesn't return within 2 to 3 years, you should be fine. It's rare that it would come back. So though there were not clear margins, you appeared to be, but as we have learned, you have been the small percentage in everything. So fast forward 4 years, 3 months post removal of the first tumours, had some different health issues. We won't bother about getting in because they turned out to be fine. But he needed a CT scan, and he always checks with his urologist first because he has a lot of scans and there's only so many that you can do with radiation, all the rest of it. So he checked and he said, yeah, get it done. And when he went and had it done, they say to you, do you want these results to go to anyone? Thank God Deane thought of it and went, oh, yep, add my urologist in, just so he had a copy. And then you got the call from your urologist. These results were done by these scans were done by an entirely different doctor. But your urologist was the first to review them, and he was straight on the phone.
Yeah, I know. Back this up a week or two, because I'd had my urologist had actually sent me, because again, we're worried about the amount of radiation I'm taking on board with all the scans and that I've had. I have an ultrasound just to have a check of, the kidney, specifically looking at where the bottom of the kidney where the cancer had been removed.
You were getting them done all along. They'd missed it.
Yeah. Now, I had this scan done, and as it turns out, they didn't actually scan the bottom of the kidney, which is what they were specifically supposed to be looking at. The ultrasound didn't even look at it, so hence I didn't see anything. And it made my urologist, question himself too. He actually said to us, he went back and had a look at the scans that he'd ordered to confirm, and there was no evidence of anything there. Fortunately, like you say, I'd asked for this other scan to go to him because he just glanced at them and went, oh, and spotted the cancer was back again. But the test that I'd actually had done here for him, if I hadn't had this other, uh, issue, we wouldn't have found this one. Again, it would have gone missed and undiagnosed. So this, in the sense, it's been lucky that both times I've found I've had cancer, because it hasn't been because I've been looking for it.
And we're talking about them missing a 4-centimeter tumor. It wasn't a dot. The ultrasound missed a 4-centimeter tumor because they simply did not scan the bottom of his kidney, which is what the request was, which we found out later. So yeah, you got the phone call.
So it does make you, for me, every time, and at the moment it's still 6 monthly, I go and have a scan. I'm trying to interpret what I'm seeing on an ultrasound, and I can be looking at my own kidney and I can't even tell it's a kidney. So, but you're really paying attention now, trying to see that they're even looking at the right area, because they've missed it before. And like I say, how do you miss a 4-centimeter tumor when that's what you're actually specifically looking for? So
the second finding
that in itself puts another layer of stress into the thing, because every time I go and have this, it's okay, well, it's come back clear, but is it clear because we didn't see what we were supposed to be looking at? Or, next time when I have one, will it pop up and now it's, obvious and someone will pick it up? It is a little bit frustrating, and it does just put more, it's another level of stress put on me every time I go and have one of these scans. You know, living in a, it's because we live in a regional area. I mean, we don't
I
have a
wouldn't
lot of
even put it down
choices.
to a regional area.
Or
This
just,
is the system. You
yeah,
are at the mercy of someone having a good or a bad day. You don't know if that person scraped through by the skin of their teeth because they were busy partying all the way through university, or if they graduated with honors and know what they're doing. Like, you don't know any of that.
yeah.
None of it. And we are at the mercy of them. And unfortunately, your cancer, the second time round, was another incidental finding because you were being reviewed for something entirely different. The cancer was just, the kidney was just happened to be part of the scan of your internal organs. So now we're facing cancer a second time. In amongst all of this, though, we also both, so we dealt with, the children. By this point, we weren't dealing with the ex-wife anymore. You had lost contact with your children altogether. They had chosen to move down to Brisbane and spend some time with their mum after she had left them behind a couple of years ago. They lived with us full time and they chose to trial Brisbane. And unfortunately, she continued working on the alienation. So you lost contact with your children altogether. So they don't even have any idea that he's had cancer again. We also had COVID hit at this time as well, and both being in government and in areas. So obviously me working in a hospital, massive impacts. But Deane's job involved the border and ships coming in, and he had a lot of dealings with that and a workforce that was not happy about the vaccines. We won't get into that, but that was really hard for you, wasn't it?
Yes, I had, there's five other parts to my business that do what I did at the time, and my job in government. And so, the group that I'm managing, you speak to all the other managers, we get together, and they'd have one person in their workforce who was not going to vaccinate, and it was mandatory for us in government that we had to vaccinate to effectively keep our jobs. Everyone else I would speak to who was the same level as me would go, I've got one person who's not going to. And when the day comes, well, they'll be removed from the workforce and we simply will employ someone new. I was in a unique position where I had 50% of my workforce refusing to vaccinate, which
And it
basically
takes
would have
12 months to
crippled my,
train someone.
yeah, and that 50% of my workforce gone just cripples my unit. We would have to outsource to other regions in the state to carry our workload. So, yeah, I had the stress of that as well, to the point where it got really vicious, not directed at me, but I got caught in the middle of it. And people who you weren't just your workmates or your staff, that you actually had relationships with them outside of work. Unfortunately, that all sort of unraveled because it got nasty with the government to the point where anything I said, because I was an agent of the government, I guess would be a way of putting it, anything I said or I did in writing would be used as evidence against me. So you really had to just not communicate, or really had to look like you're a lawyer every time you said something or wrote so, really tried not to write anything down or put it in an email. That became really high stress. And then at the 11th hour, the government decided that they weren't going to enforce anything. And
Yeah, not in your area anyway. That was true.
yeah, certainly, yeah, in health, they kept it going. In my area, they decided that they got up to 24 hours before it and then back down from their commitment. So,
And for me, it was the hospital. And I think it was 4 weeks prior to the official COVID outbreak and lockdown, the hospital had decided to do a restructure. So it went from 6 major units down to 3. So I went from, say, a $35 million budget, staffing of around 300, to a $110 million budget, services I barely knew, staffing of 750, 40 of which were reporting directly to me. So my direct reports doubled. It just become this massive beast, and I'm trying to wrap my head around new services that I didn't even know, because really only about 20% of my business was anything that I did before. So it was huge, it was massive. And there were concerns expressed at the time, and the union was involved and everything, about how big these units were. And then on top of that, COVID hits. So everyone's scrambling with procedures and policies and navigating this, which we all know, you know, plus your own personal things going on. We all know how COVID went. So we had the kids, we had the cancer, we had the COVID. And it was just, it was a lot. It was a lot. And I want people to think about this, that stress and inflammation, which comes from stress, damages your metabolism, your metabolic health. Now, I'm not talking about metabolism in women and losing weight. I'm talking about your metabolic function. And Deane's cancer came back when it theoretically should not have. And then we also look at, you know, where I've ended up as well. But it was high stress. But yeah, we got the phone call when you did that extra test, and it had come back.
Yeah, and I'd switched employers at that stage. I moved to look, after what happened with COVID, that pretty much burnt me out in that space. And I really wanted a job where I just, effectively I worked for myself within a business, not having a staff, reporting staff. Yeah.
But you'd only been there 4 weeks when this hit.
And of course, we took the phone call in my office at work, thinking it was just going to be a nothing call, and then to find out that you have cancer back, and you're going to have another surgery, and this time it's removed the whole organ. And it was, I'd changed jobs, and I tried, because I'd gone from a government department to a government corporation, I really had tried to bring all of my leave entitlements over. And I wasn't worried about my long service and that sort of stuff. It was predominantly the sick leave I really wanted to protect, but I was unable to bring that across. So I lost all of that. And like you say, I'd only just started with this new job and then got diagnosed again. And straight away, right or wrong, you don't think rationally when it happens. I'd only just started, so I was still under probation with my new employer. You've got no leave. I think I had point something of a day's leave or something. I really had nothing, certainly no sick leave. And now looking at knowing what I did the first time, that was a 6-week haul to come back from that first round of surgery. And looking at it again, going, well, how few things went straight through your mind. It was, how are we going to survive with this? Am I going on 6 weeks unpaid leave? Will I have a job to come back to? Or is this, it's not rational, but you're under probation, and all you're thinking is, I've just lost my job. Then there's the stresses of what this means to your family. Like, I'd watched you and the kids, and particularly your kids, go through this with me once before. And, now I'm sitting here thinking, Christ, I'm going to put you all through this again. From my perspective, and I can only talk from my perspective, it was just a lot of, it knocked me down. Well, look, I know you saw it. How I dealt with round 1, round 2, go to the surgery I've just had, it wears you down each time you go through this. You kind of get to the point where, I wouldn't say what's the point, but you're just expecting to be hit with another round of bad news and another bloody surgery. So you kind of get into that if you allow yourself. And look, I got into the space of just, fuck it, this is going to get me. Why am I trying to put a nice looking corpse in a box? Is kind of what I got to mentally with it. It was certainly after the second round of surgery, initially, I was very quick to bounce back from that surgery, and it wasn't as physically traumatic because it was keyhole surgery the second time. Like, the day after I had the surgery, I remember I had to have my doctor coming in and saying to me, "Oh, have you been up and been walking?" And proudly showing him my watch and going, "I've done 7,000 steps." The day after I had surgery, to which he was a bit shocked, and I needed to back it down a little bit. But I had the mindset that I knew what I had to do because I'd done it before, and I just needed to do what I needed to do to get through it. But as that went on, you kind of you get in a headspace where you're waiting for it to happen again. You're waiting for the next bit of bad news. And, it takes a lot to get past that. I mean, I'm working now with Greta, who you'll have a podcast, I believe, that's going to come out
Spoken a
shortly
lot
after
about
this
Greta.
one. Yeah, and you know, your ladies all know about Greta. I'm working with Greta to try and make a mental shift in where my mindset is with it. Because even particularly now after this last surgery and knowing I was going to have it after we came back from the United States, I really just went back from the US and just went, fuck it. And I've done nothing until I've had the surgery now. And now I'm waiting to, you know, come off light duty so I can go back to the gym and get back into it again. But I've all the way through this process, even to today, have still just been sitting in, fuck it. It's going to take a big shift to move me beyond that. Working with Greta is kind of fun because if you've spoken about it before, I find it challenging to absorb everything that the way that Greta thinks about stuff. I do agree with what she says, but I'm very scientifically minded. But it's been fun, you know, and she's worked with me to find material that will make sense to me and for me to accept. You know, look, I'm enjoying the journey I'm having with her. But for me now, the biggest thing going forward now is trying to get your headspace right to keep going forward with everything in life. Because as you saw off the back of the second surgery, my focus shifted, and I've had sort of discussions with Greta around it as well. Is I shifted mentally to being prepared and having you prepared should something happen to me again, rather than just enjoying life for what it is and living my life. I really went a negative place and prepared for, want a better description, you're preparing for your own death. And that's a bit of a, I do apologize, I brought your podcast right down into a dark place here, but it's one of those things that I guess we don't talk about a lot. And for me, I don't talk about it. You know better than anyone. It's very hard for you to. I'll share some things, but there's a lot of things that I will just bury. My coping mechanism is just to shove it down inside, never talk about it, and try and go past it. And it doesn't work.
No, for us, I think both of us, a lot of this is, you know, we spent so much time fighting the courts, fighting your ex-wife, fighting this previous doctor. I mean, we did the right things. We followed all the processes of putting the complaints in with the ombudsman and AHPRA, and they literally brushed off everything that doctor had done for the cancer to come back. And just to go back to when you had that kidney removed, when I came back to work. So I had been working in a special project for obs and gynae for this hospital, and they were in not a good place. Again, they had employed a clinical director for obs and gynae. I don't know what his background was, but there were a lot of women he hurt with gynecological operations that he hurt. There were some baby deaths, and there was this whole review going on. So once the review had been done, they brought in a consultant to implement the strategies. I was brought in because obs and gynae had been under me previously, so to navigate things and just history, not from a clinical point of view, but from a business perspective, and to help the consultant navigate the system. And I literally sat in meetings and watched everyone go, oh, that's not a recommendation. We've already got that. We've done this. We've done that. They had done nothing. They just took their old systems and said, yes, we've got that. The point of the review was the current system was not working, and they didn't change anything. And then watched the health minister herself stand in front of everyone and say, we've implemented 53 of the 137 recommendations already. They had done fuck all. Honestly, they had done nothing. It was all for show. It was all to get the media attention away from the serious compromised state that obs and gynae were in. And they were just lying through their teeth. And I was part of it. And then amongst all of this, you got your second diagnosis. Took some time out while you had the surgery. I came back, and as I came back, it hit the headlines that this original doctor that we complained about, that everyone said was fine, that they knew was not fine, was now suspended again. And I think I actually did miss a part of this, is that he was under investigation for something else he had done. 4 days later, his sentence was handed down, and AHPRA said it was negligent what he had done. And this is available on Google as well, Daryl Stevens. I'm going to name him. I know we said we weren't going to name him, but that's one I will name. Daryl Stevens. Go and look him up. You can see what he did. And he was fined $30,000, but because he was in a supportive environment at Mackay Base Hospital, that he could continue to work. And 4 days later, he operated on Deane and fucked him, well and truly. Then he continues to work. The story's gone on how you've heard. I come back from him losing his kidney. We've tried going to the ombudsman and AHPRA, and everyone's gone, nothing to see here. And this doctor ends up suspended again. And I found myself obsessive over, I don't watch news or TV. I haven't done since 9/11. It's too much. I just bowed out of news and stuff then. But I was trawling the news, looking for articles on this guy. I had a lot of access to a lot of systems at high level in the job that I was in, and I could have accessed his HR records, his clinical records, everything. I could have seen everything. And I found myself wanting to do that. And that's ethically not the right thing to do. And then watching what they had done with Obs and Gynae, just trying to hide everything, I just realized that Deane was just a victim of it. And they weren't even, I was one of them, and they didn't care. They lied to me. People outwardly lied to me that this doctor was safe. And he was now suspended for a second time. The people who said nothing to me, someone just had to say, look on AHPRA's website. And I would have seen what he was under investigation for before you had that first operation. And now here we are, years down the track, and he's at it again. Turns out there's a lot of people he was hurting. He has now had his license removed from him, and we did put a second complaint in that went through an internal investigation. In that moment, I was watching what they were doing with Obs and Gynae, lying, and realizing that, I put my heart and soul into my career, and they didn't care. They didn't care about their patients, and you suffered for that. They didn't care about the people that worked there. It's just such a big beast. So it was then that I stepped aside. I'd already started studying nutrition and strength and conditioning. It was something I wanted to dabble in, and looking at taking a different pathway, more initially it was still going to be in the public health space, more from the preventative side. And I ended up leaving between COVID and the massive areas we were taking under. I ended up with burnout. I watched what they did with Obs and Gynae, and I was extremely stressed over everything that was happening with Deane, and that this guy was getting away with it again and had hurt more people. That's where I bowed out and I stepped away. And my health took a turn. I lived years, and part of this story is I lived years, as you can hear what we've been through, in excessive cortisol never going down, which leads to adrenal insufficiency. Basically, your adrenals stop working, and you produce very little cortisol, which is where I have ended up now, and probably have been for quite some time. But this doctor has now had his license taken from him. But even the letter in the time that I've been out, so I formally resigned just before Christmas. Yay. So, I dived deep into coaching, and it has served me well. And if there's one thing that I'll take away from this whole thing is, I'm working with Greta now, trying to deal with all of this. But if there's one thing I take away that's good from this, is putting me in the place where I'm helping so many women with their own health. And I truly and absolutely love it. But I think you and I were in a place where we were fighting your ex, we were fighting the doctor, we were fighting the hospital, because nobody was listening. Everywhere we turned, nobody listened. And we were stuck in this.
Yeah, and I got to a point. I got to a point where, it was stop fighting the ex. You were never going to win that, and and it wasn't about winning, but you weren't even going to get a fair go. So gave that away. We initially put our complaints into, AHPRA, the ombudsman, the hospital. They all came back with nothing to see here, and you could continue to fight it, but to what end? At the end of the day, I had to make a decision for me of, did I want to keep beating my head against a wall, just give it up and, shift my focus and go forward with my life. So, I did that, and we've ultimately done that now as well.
It took us a bit
But
to get
yeah,
here.
it did. But for me now, it's I look at my cancer journey. If there's anything I can take from it, it's take the positive. You're where you are today, partly because of that.
Yeah,
So that's a positive and that's a win. And if that becomes the focus going forward for me, that's the thing to hang on to, then I wouldn't say it's worth it. I don't recommend anyone doing it for any career change.
absolutely not.
But like, that's something that has come out of this whole thing that hasn't just been total shit like everything else that's been in it. It's been a positive out of it. You're doing what you love now. You're helping other people. It's that I wouldn't say it makes it worthwhile. That's the wrong choice of words. But I look at that now and go, that makes me happy seeing that, because
You've been so
part
supportive.
of the whole cancer thing for me is not only did I have to deal with the cancer, but I've had to sit here and watch you dealing with it as well, and everyone
I lost a
who's
career out of it.
who it's touched. Yeah, but not even that. Like, it's the mental, the emotional drain that it has on everyone. This stuff I didn't even see. Well, I'm quite comfortably knocked out under anaesthetic having surgery while you're sitting there for however many hours the surgeries went for.
Hours.
Stressing, and there's nothing I can do to help you at that point. So um, I,
We
I
we
look for the positives out of all of this. And for me now, having gone now through this third procedure to have the hydrocele repaired.
So that's been an
Um,
interesting one. We haven't actually touched on exactly what that was, but because of the damage the doctor had done to the vein going down and causing the hydrocele, the second doctor had said, well, when it gets to the point where it's impacting life, we will address it. He just couldn't address it at the time that the kidney
yeah,
was being removed. It was all a lot. So we went to the US. We walk lots, and just the walking and the friction and the movement made it flare again. We're going to Europe in June, and it was like, so we spoke to the doctor then, and he was like, yeah, time to get it fixed. So I'll describe it. They've slid open his scrotum, removed his testicle, drained the fluid, and removed that whole membrane from
that makes
around
you
the
uncomfortable.
testicle, popped it back in, and stitched it up. So it wasn't, look, it wasn't significant surgery like removing a kidney, a whole kidney, but it's certainly probably been the most painful of your surgeries.
Yeah, I know you've commented on it that it's probably
He
the
was
one I've
much more of a
taken.
pussy over this one than losing an organ, let me tell you. Men and their penises,
And
I don't know.
yeah, and you're right, but you're right though. Like, having surgery there has been harder to bounce back from than having it entire organ removed. It's just what it is. It's nothing to do with, it's just a really sensitive area, and you're conscious of it in everything you do. And more so now, you just notice it. Like, you watch me go after I got home from surgery, like, oh, well, I can peel a potato. That's not a problem. Didn't think I couldn't lift a box of potatoes up onto the kitchen counter though. And then you realize that that's all connected. It all pulls all through there. So
Yeah.
it's probably been the harder one to recover from, just because of where it is. You can't walk and do anything to avoid it.
You're almost good
Um,
now. We're a couple of weeks. The stitches have all gone. It's just a little bit tender. So you're doing
yeah,
well now.
I'm good. I'm just now just marking time to get through the time I have to sit on night duties before I can go back and
Yeah.
push myself. So for me now, I'm keen to get back into it. I've put a few kilos on. I think for interest sake, I'll do a front shot, side shot, put my measurements up. Happy for
Progress photos, ladies. You've heard
yeah,
me talk about it. Progress
yeah.
photos.
Happy to look. We'll put a before and after up. We'll put what I looked like before this all happened, and then what I look like now on the back of everything. And but a part of that, I have been
By the
compromised with.
way, hot prior to all of this.
But I have
Not
been
that you're awful
compromised
now. I
with the
mean, it's
surgery.
not. but the mental impact of what this has had has been huge. And, I talk to my ladies a lot about, it's not just about what food you eat and what training you do. This have a change in your physique and your health. It's mental and lifestyle. And if you're mentally not in it, you're not going to do those lifestyle behaviors. And you've got a lot of emotional stuff to address. And I think, I was saying before that we were fighting the ex, we were fighting the doctor, we were fighting the hospital. It was like both you and I were poised to fight. And then we found ourselves fighting each other. I'm an expressive, I just want to take people down. People hurt you and I want to make them pay. You want to bury it, not talk about it, but that burying it becomes explosive with a hair trigger. And, it got to the point, without going into too much detail, it got into the point where we were inadvertently fighting each other. And, it's not good for anyone. So just before we headed to America, we started to work with Greta. There was a moment in time there that was particularly hard for Deane. I mean, it was for both of us. But I encouraged him to get on a call with Greta, and the change in one call was phenomenal. So we're continuing to work that. You've got to work the inner as well, no matter what your circumstances are. Deane's, overall health, putting the kidney and the cancer aside, he's had scans, he's got fatty liver. Like there's things that have happened because of the shift in mindset through the stress that he's had. My health has had an impact because now I have adrenal insufficiency because of everything I've been through. And, the only thing I know to do is, I think I was seeing a psychologist and she said to me, you have one tool in your toolbox and that's a hammer. And a hammer is great. You go at it and that has served you. But sometimes it takes other tools, and I had no other tools. So I just kept going. No matter what it was, I just kept going and I kept fighting. And it wore me out. And, I'm paying the price now. But without us both being willing to do the emotional work on what, and I say the word trauma, and I said at the beginning of the podcast, and I kind of felt myself shudder. People throw this word trauma around so much, but this is trauma. We have been through a lot and we're working hard on it. We're so much better now, but it's still a work in progress. We are still working on this. And I feel like, couple of weeks, just about a week before Christmas, I went into work and I resigned. It was like, I always considered going back. It was a high paying job, secure, you get holiday pay, all those sorts of things. And I realized that regardless of the money, I could not be part of a system that is so broken. And this is bigger than Mackay. And maybe this is a podcast for another time about the healthcare system, because there wasn't one person at fault. There are systemic issues within the system. And I felt like while I was there working for it, I was being party to that. And I can't be. So I closed the door on that. And I felt like it was, I've finally been, I think it's around October, I actually walked into I was seeing a psychologist then before Greta. And I walked in and I just said to her, I said, no, it might have been earlier than that. We got that final letter from the complaint, and it was the response to the complaint was appalling, very cold-hearted. He never even had open disclosure, which should have been done. For those of you who know, he should have been invited in. They should have spoken. In the letter, they acknowledged that the doctor never documented anything, that he did have positive margins and it was recorded, and he hasn't issued that he didn't document anything about the stent. He didn't put any of Deane's previous medical records about his other kidney on file, that the operation should never have been open the way it was. It should have been keyhole. It shouldn't have been something that was attempted in Mackay. It should have gone to Brisbane. We have it in writing. They've admitted all of that. And it was literally dot point. You said this, we found this. You said this, we found this. With a, closing statement of, thank you for your feedback. We hope to improve our services. Like, it just total and utter. They just don't fucking care what they're doing to people. And after we got that letter, I walked into my psychologist and I just went, I'm done. All along, I've been saying I didn't want to be angry anymore, because I've been so angry for so long, for so many different reasons. And I just said, I've had enough. I'm sick of hearing my own self-pity, is what I felt like. I was sick of listening to my own victim story. And then that was probably about the July. And then by the October, we were exploring what it would look like if I went back to work. And by the October, I was like, I don't think I can do it. And I went in December and I just said, I'm resigning. And the funny thing is so many close people in that organization are, don't come back, don't do it. There are so many worn out, broken people in there because of what's happening. And then, this last surgery for you, we knew this one was coming. We knew 2 years ago that at some point this would have to be done. And it was, it's like that hanging over us from this previous doctor. And it's done now. We can close that. I feel like we can close that door.
Yeah, and so do I. I think while it's been there and it's just been hanging in the background, it's something I've been able to just use to tell myself that I can just, do nothing. It's been a prop for me to lean on and just as an excuse as to fuck it, I'm not going to look after myself because I'm going to have this anyway. For me now, I don't have the excuse, and that's why I'm happy to, chuck up my photos on to your clients, and I'll join the journey with them.
You know
I've
what
got
you're
out of shape.
committing to here?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. But you know what? It also makes me accountable with this as well.
Because I can
Which
tell you
is
now, people, doesn't matter that I'm a health coach, doesn't matter that I'm a strength and conditioning coach. Your partner never fucking listens. So
no,
you've heard it from
we're
him.
the last ones to listen.
They're the last ones to listen.
But I think if anyone listens to this and listens to I guess what I've been through with my journey now, and if that helps, just one person goes, you know what, I haven't had anything like that to deal with, and so what am I complaining about? Then great. If it helps someone else put it in perspective, for me, there's always someone, there's someone who's worse off than me, who's going through the same journey I'm at, at the moment. Part of our trip to the US, you can see openly the issues that they have with their healthcare system over there, with the way they eat, what they
The
eat.
food's horrendous, isn't it?
Well, you go to a train station and just look at the number of double amputees there from diabetes, and it just blows your mind. And so, that as sad as that is, that has been a positive for me because yeah, okay, I've been through a lot of physical trauma with this, but I'm not,
You're not
my
there.
life's not that bad. I've got an avenue to come back to from where I'm at now. So, the trip to the States, that is just one thing that just, helps you put it in perspective a little bit. That, I can sit here and have a pity party for myself as much as I want, but at the end of the day, I'm in a better position than a lot of other people. So, yep, I know this is going to suck and I'm not going to enjoy having to, round back on the amount of chocolate I like to eat and, all the shit I like to indulge in. But, you've got to put it in perspective. I've done this damage to myself and now I need to unfuck myself. So there's the physical side of that, which, is one part of it. There's the mental side of it as well, and that's where Greta comes into it for me. Also, other things like was it 2 days ago? I think you were a bit surprised that I did yoga or something.
Oh, yeah. I went out to the gym and
in
he
the
was going to
morning.
come
Now,
walking. But you said no, you didn't come to the gym and walk the treadmills. And I was like, okay. And then when I came home, you said that you'd done yoga. I was like, interesting.
yeah, and so I'm exploring alternative exercises, I guess. If it means I still do the gym, but I can break it up with other things, that doesn't make it as much of a sufferfest for me to go to the gym. If making, gym one day, yoga the next day, Tai Chi, I'm keen to explore that and understand that more. There's a low impact, but, still physical movement. So,
I think,
I've changed my thinking and sort of turned the corner on where I was of just, everything was just too much. I still now look down and go, well, I've got a bit of work to do, but
it'll fix
it's
it.
the challenge.
And I think, if there's one thing we've taken out of this, and I remember the first time you were diagnosed, because we had suffered a couple of years of the court, the manipulation, blah, 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 everything that had gone on with the children. And the first time you said to me, after you'd had the tumors removed and we worked out that they were, you shouldn't be that young when you get it, shouldn't be that fast growing, and it shouldn't be two tumors, all these things that it shouldn't be. That you said to me then, you said, I believe this is caused because of the stress that I'm under, because the whole children thing. Look, we're not going to get into that. We had an agreement before this podcast that that's not a topic for deep exploration for the public. But for anyone with children, to have to fight for your children and have them manipulated against you is, please understand that if you're a parent, you would know how fucking devastating that is. And we lived and breathed that for years. And I remember you said to me, I believe this is stress. And then when we look at, it came back at a time that you should have been safe. It came back quite aggressively again. Again, when we look at all the stress that we were under, unfortunately, when they've taken the kidney out, though the tumor itself hadn't grown past the kidney, they take the fat around it as well. And there were some small cancer cells found within the fat. So cells have moved. Did they go anywhere else? We don't know. But for me, I go, if we don't find a way to work together and harmonize our lives and be happier and reduce the stress, you will be at risk of it metastasizing. And though it's a small percentage, that is of no comfort to us, because Deane has been the small percentage of everything. So getting healthy, reducing stress, getting sunlight, ensuring that you're eating, nourishing foods. It doesn't mean that you can't indulge in chocolate, but what percentage of your diet is that? Looking at all those sorts of things. And if there is emotional stress, doing that, and you're doing the emotional work now, which has given you the space to, like, you now talk about a future. There was a point where Deane didn't talk about a future. This whole experience totally changed the man that I fell in love with. It took him from me. I thought I got to the end of the podcast without getting too bad. But to be able to see him now go, yep, okay, it's done. I feel like 2024 is that year that we're putting everything to rest. We're not fighting that doctor anymore. He's had his day. He's done. We know no one has listened, and I'm using this podcast as a platform to plead with you all. Do everything you can to nurture yourself and your health now, and stay out of the hospital system, the public health system, the traditional medical system for as long as possible. And majority of our health in older years is metabolic health that could have been avoided, because you don't know what doctor is going to front up in front of you the day that you turn up. So do whatever you can to stay out of it. Take care of your health now. And it gives me hope to hear you talk about taking back your health. And I know it's challenging for you, given, I know you don't love to train, but you accept that that's still part of it for, muscle and longevity and part of the health and everything, as well as your restrictions. I mean, it's still something that needs to be done, but, exploring other things that will help support it and get you through.
Yeah. And I think another thing we've done, the US, I guess, was the jumping off point for us, is we're doing Europe this year.
Exciting.
Up until now, and look, we've been raising kids. We've got to the point where our kids are all 18 and out the door, and where we can now focus back on ourselves again. And I think it's important that people do that. We very much have worked the last, both of us, the last 18 years. We've taken holidays and stuff with the kids and that, but we've never really taken time for ourselves.
You
And I
lose
think that's
yourself as a parent. Everything goes to the children.
You do. And I think it's important that we do. Another thing, actually, we touched on the other day was prior to COVID, we used to do date night. Like we would
Oh,
quarantine
yeah.
date night once a fortnight. We would have date night, and that was just you and I, no kids, and we'd concentrate on our relationship. Now that all stopped during COVID for obvious reasons because you couldn't go anywhere. But we never really picked it up
Never
again.
picked it up again.
But it's something, this year we're going to consciously pick up again.
We have a dancing app.
You're going to learn to dance, or I'm going to
I've
learn to
always wanted
dance.
to learn to dance. I think Deane felt a bit intimidated doing that publicly. So he found an app that shows you how to dance. Because I mean, I love to go out and move and listen to music and just move, but I'd love to be able to actually do some proper dancing. One of the coaches that we met in America, in Austin, well, we met them in Dallas and she lived in Austin. And so we caught up with her and her now fiance. Elena and Michael. So we caught up with them in Austin and went out dancing. They do swing dancing, and it was just so awesome watching them be able to get up on the floor and move. And not that swing dancing is personally my thing, but just to be able to get up and dance. So that was my Christmas present from Deane, was this app that's going to teach us to dance. Show her how to dance. Is that what it's called? Let me have a look. I'm just looking.
No,
Show Her Off Dance, if anyone's interested. Wasn't an expensive app, but it's like, and it encourages date night. It encourages, it's got conversation and question markers and things. So it encourages it to be like a date night as well. So we're going to start doing that again, which will be really nice.
you're going to be awkward for me, but
I don't know how to dance either. I just know how to shake my booty a little every now and then. But we'll do that in our living room. That's okay. We don't have to go out for date night. But like you say, I think the point out of this is there are so many mums out there, to bring it back to a lot of my audience is, mums, they get to their 40s and they're just, they hit perimenopause, the symptoms are going crazy. They look on their life and they just go, I've given everything. This is the time to recreate yourself. If we can do it amongst everything that has happened to us, you can do it. Make this your era of change and be that badass 40-year-old, with a rocking body. You actually can do it no matter what your starting point. Just remember, it just takes consistency and probably longer than what you realize it does. It's not an 8-week program. It's got to be the way you live. But you have to address everything. It's not just go out and get a diet or just go to the gym and lift. You've heard us talk about the emotional side of things. I mean, Deane knows how to lift, Deane knows how to eat, but if he's not doing that, and a lot of those blockers were emotionally. He had, the trauma of everything that has happened. And I think, particularly after that, losing the organ and knowing that it had gone to the fat, like you said, you were sitting around waiting to die, waiting for it to come back, and it's shifting that mindset and removing that trauma from that. You might have to do some real inner work, but you've got to start living like the person that you want to be now. And it takes a little more than just a bit of food and exercise. You've got to look at everything. It's got to be a lifestyle, and you've got to nourish the emotional side too. And there's certainly been a lot of tears when I've spoken with Greta, and I think for you as well, as we go through the process, but they get less and less. And I bounce back from things a lot quicker as well. I see that you bounce back from where we have moments where we've both got those boxing gloves on again, and then it's, we're both able to come back from that a lot quicker now because we're doing the work, and it's not easy at all.
yeah, I will say probably, I don't mind sharing this, I guess. One of the things for me, my whole life up until I got, cancer really the first time, and the second time, I guess, made it even more pronounced was, and you see it, we sort of, we watched, the end of Yellowstone and,
Yeah.
this sad bit in that. Now, go back 10 years ago, I would have been unemotional, wouldn't have cared, sat there, watched it, and moved on to the next thing. There's things now that I watch that I just turn into a dribbling mess.
Yeah, he was.
It's
Yellowstone really got him.
yeah, it's kind of like you just pulled the top off the can, and now there's no way of putting it back on. All that emotion just 40 years of suppression has come out. It's not a bad thing. in the
But that
moment,
used to
trying to
come out in,
understand
it
why
used to
it
be
happens to me.
explosive before, though.
Yeah. We watched that Chris Hemsworth series where he's
Mm.
trying to prolong his life. And there was that episode where he met that young girl with cancer. And I think we watched that. That was in between round 1 and 2 for me.
Mm.
I look at that now and look at that young lady who she just sat there and talked to him and was, it's like she had accepted in herself that she was going to die because she was stage 4, I think. I couldn't watch that. I mean, you found me literally leave the room and found me just sobbing my heart out in the bedroom. It
Yeah.
is very confronting for me to see that. Now I can sit here and reflect on it, and the inner strength that that young woman had to just talk matter of factly about that she was going to die was just, I can't fathom that. But yeah, these are the things now that it's the little things that I guess I'm speaking probably as a guy here, but in my generation, I'm 50, so guys who are around my age, you're never encouraged to express any of this,
Mm.
as a child, certainly not as an adult. It shouldn't really take something like cancer to make you, you know,
Do the work.
express yourself. And now you just don't know what to do with it. It's emotions that you've never had to use, or more so you've been told your whole life not to use. And this is some of the stuff that Greta and I talk about. Is being able to even put words to these emotions is something I am unskilled at doing because I've never had to. If that emotion surfaced, you didn't quite know what it was, but it didn't feel good, so you just pushed
Bury
that.
it.
Yeah,
Bury
yeah,
that bitch.
you got rid of it. Like don't deal with that. That's not fun. Whereas now, yeah, it's a little bit embarrassing sometimes for me. It just comes out of you'll be. God, I hope I'm not sitting in a movie theater at some stage watching a movie and just, by the same token, I go, you know what, fuck it. If that's what happens, that's what happens because, that's normal. That's being human. And for me, it's like half of that emotion you, as a young boy, born in the 70s, I guess even in the 80s, they would have had it as well. It was stuff you were told not to, you didn't do. And, for me, having a military background as well, certainly that's not an environment where that's encouraged. So,
And you grew
um,
up in that environment too, because your dad was military.
yeah. So that's another positive for me looking at, for everything I've been through, I've unlocked emotions that, I've traditionally have just locked down and not expressed. So, that's not good for your health long term, even suppressing all that as well. So, another positive that's come out of it.
Yeah. Anyway, I think, there's so many things that came out of this. And I know this has been a long podcast, but I've said for a long time now that I was going to talk more about it. This is
Well, I will
us.
add one more, baby.
Yeah.
One positive. The other positive for me is you, because now I'm going to get emotional. For me, it's been, like we talked about this before we did this podcast too, and we haven't mentioned it, but when I first got diagnosed, we were pretty early in our relationship. Part of me gave you the ultimatum to basically, if you didn't want to do it, you didn't have to. And, I didn't want to put you and your kids through, the shit show this potentially could have been. So, look, you've stuck with me all the way through it, and
100%, baby.
we've we've got stronger, as a couple because of it. I wouldn't recommend it as a way of strengthening your relationship, but um, that's to me that's probably the biggest positive out of all of this is the relationship that I have with you. Uh, you know, as a result of the adversity that we've had to face.
Yeah. We've gotten a lot better, a lot stronger. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Well, maybe without the cancer. And, to me, it wasn't a choice. When you love someone, there is no choice. Like you gave me a choice to walk, but that's just, it's not a choice. It just, put the boxing gloves on and fight, baby. You know me. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for listening to us ramble on. I hope that there are some nuggets in here that you can take away. It's been a lot of, there's so many different angles. I said to Deane before I started this, I don't even know what angle I want to take this from. Do I want to take it from the look after your health and don't get into the health system because a doctor can fuck you? Do we want to take it from a, look after your emotional health? There is just so many different aspects of this, but I did say that I would talk about one because Deane recently had his surgery and I was, talking about that on stories, and also my adrenal fatigue. And I said that was related to his surgery in some way, shape, or form. And I always said that I would do a podcast on it. And thank you, baby, for being brave enough to get on and tell your story. We have had some amazing people on our journey as well that have supported us, some beautiful families and friends that have seen us through these times. But I do feel like 2024 has put to bed a lot of things. Your final surgery to tidy up the last of things. Me leaving the hospital, which essentially was, even though I had a career there, it was a very toxic environment, which is a story for another day. Being able to start a career that truly and utterly fulfills me. And if I'm going to take that from cancer, well, I'll take it, because cancer fucking gave a lot. It dished out a lot. So I'm going to take that one. And please know that from the bottom of my heart, every single one of my clients, I've said it to you before, and if you're listening to this, this is why. I truly love you all. I am blessed to have a roster that I don't open up and go, fuck, I've got to answer that person. I don't have that. I honestly, for all the stages that you're in, I truly do love you all, and want the best for you all. And anyone else's path, if you're in my DMs and I'm talking to you, whether you become a client or not, I don't care. If I can help you, if one thing I say helps you, I feel extremely privileged to be here today to be able to do this for you. So with that, because I'm getting all emotional again and it's time to go. Bloody hell, I can't keep doing this. I want to say thank you for listening. And if you did get any little nuggets out of this, please feel free to take a screenshot and share on Instagram. Tag me at strengthtraining.nutritionist. And if there's anything from this episode you want me to expand on, drop me a line, ask me a question, whatever it is. At Instagram, my DMs are all open. Love to you all.